It's over, Anakin. I have the higher ground. Of course, we have another special daily on our hands here, and it's Star Wars Day. I never thought that we would actually see Star Wars in Isaac, and honestly, if I didn't know that May 4th is the National Star Wars Day, I would have never guessed that based on these items, this is what this is supposed to be representing. But of course, when you think about it, we have technology, which is supposed to represent lasers, we have the sword, which is of course supposed to present the lightsaber, and it just goes to show that really, if we can have a National Battery Day and have it in a daily form, I think that Star Wars makes the cut. It's such a big franchise at this point, it's kind of been cemented into our culture. I think a world without Star Wars would have been just a bit more dull world, so I am glad that we have a National Day to represent it, at least in some form and time. Of course, being one of the most highest grossing franchises in the old history of mankind, it just goes to show that we really do like kind of silly things, but also sci-fi, also lightsabers are pretty cool. But let's talk about the daily. So with these two items, I would say that it's not that good of a start at all. Technology, I think, even though it's a pretty neat item because it does have some fun synergies, it does turn out to be an item that mostly gimps you in most cases, just because you essentially are locked to just shooting in 4 cardinal directions, and usually that's not that big of a problem, but especially with Afterbirth Plus, a lot of new rooms have been added which kind of mess with this concept that you're able to shoot in just your 4 directions and actually are able to do with enemies. There are so many rooms which just has enemies behind the rocks or pitfalls or whatever, which just makes them more dispersed and just much harder to shoot. Obviously with technology you do have the advantage of shooting enemies, multiple enemies at once, and you have infinite range, so it's good for things like boss rush or large rooms, but it's absolutely horrible for rooms like this, which you really can't angle your shots and you really can't get into those crevices to deal with enemies up front and close. Of course, that's why you have the sword, which I'm not really sure how it's called, but the sword is useless. First of all, it has a much smaller hitbox than it would seem, but even if it did have a bigger one, it still deals practically no damage and you can't really do much with it. It's okay in some very nasty tight situations for you to just maybe be able to deal with enemies, but most often than not, it just serves to be annoying because whenever you have a boomfly flying into your face, maybe you angle your sword in a direction and that just deals that last tick of damage for the boomfly to explode into your face. So it's not a good start. What I would say it's a very annoying start, because I do tend to imagine that a lot of people would just straight skip out this weapons, or not weapons, but items. I know that I wouldn't have picked up the sword ever because, like I said, I just think it's a bad item in most cases. Technology is cool. I definitely think that's much more flavorful and just much more fun. But at a certain point, there is a question of where can you draw the line, and I think maybe this is just some bad variance, but it really felt underwhelming in this particular case. It was obviously good in some rooms, but in most cases there were so many rooms which it just goes to show that Afterbirth Plus really has added a lot of tanky enemies with a lot of HP that hide behind a lot of rocks, and that's maybe not even that big of a problem, but what you have to realize is, especially with penetrative shots, it can also be quite a danger to you, and maybe we take that for granted because penetrative shots are obviously pretty good in a lot of cases, but if you have any form of spectral tears or penetrative shots which are able to shoot multiple enemies at once, you have to be much more careful on when you're actually aiming, because as soon as that shot goes beyond the first enemy, it's gonna hit the enemy behind it, and if that happens to be some enemy which can explode into tears or whatever, you just have to be much more careful when you're actually firing. Obviously your firepower is much greater, but like with anything else in Isaac, it does come with a downside, and I like that aspect of the game, because even though you have these very powerful items and obviously having infinite range and also the ability to shoot multiple enemies at once, like technology, you do come up with a disadvantage of just being able to shoot in 4 directions. Of course, with that said, I'm not trying to blame the game for my bad play, because this was horribly played by me. I just made so many mistakes in this one, which I feel could be amended or changed in some regard. Like the first mistake right out here was me trying to explore the rest of the floor, even though I only had a minute and 20 seconds left in order to get to Mom and boss rush. For some reason, I thought it might be a good idea to explore the rest of the floor. I just said I'm not gonna make it, but how could I have not made it with Brimstone and technology? That's just such a powerful combo by itself that I think I could have easily made it, and especially with Sacrificial Dagger, it would allow me to kill Mom in like 10 seconds, so I really wasn't in any danger or in any rush, but for some reason I decided I had the D6, I'll go explore the rest of the floor, try to reroll the shop maybe and get a Mama Mega. For some reason I thought that's a good idea, even though you should never bank on Mama Mega being there for you, especially if you don't have enough money to afford an item from the shop. So I don't really know what I was thinking when I was playing, it was just a mistake overall. I should have just made a rush for it as soon as I actually got Brimstone and I realized that I was strong enough in order to make it to Mom. I should have just actually went there and did it. I'm not sure if I had the Hermit card prior to that, because if I did, that was definitely a mistake, or at least if I didn't have it, I should have definitely turned around as soon as I got a Hermit card, explored the floor, and then teleported out of Mom, and I think that would have just landed me and resulted in much more points in general. Of course, to spite me, what this game has decided to do was to give me the Curse of the Blind, so I don't really know which items I had in my treasure room or in my shop, so even if there was a Mama Mega, I probably missed it because I couldn't see what they were. So it was just a trolley run all in all. There were just so many things that didn't really go right, but at the same time there's so many things that kind of I made a mistake because of it, and of course it's completely my fault, but it's just some circumstances which you really can't predict. So for example, I had Guppy Scholar and also had Dark Judas. So of course what your plan here is, in most cases, what I would imagine, especially with an item like Technology, you really want that damage. So we're just trying really hard to revive myself, to find a Sacrifice Room, or not a Sacrifice Room, a Blood Bank, or maybe the Curse Room to actually deal damage to myself so I can actually revive as Dark Judas. But I think what happened, even though I managed to die multiple times, I think I died 7 times, and all of those times Guppy Scholar revived me without the extra damage from Dark Judas, which is just upsetting and unfortunate in some cases. But what was even worse is that there was basically no curse rooms, which I could have seen up until a certain point, so I missed all of that. But also, when I did find a blood bank, I played it and it ended up exploding with a blood bank when I had half of a red heart remaining. So that was very upsetting. At least if I got an Ivy back, I would have been able to keep that and kept dealing more damage on myself. But with only half a heart remaining, there's really nothing you can do in that situation. I could have intentionally taken damage in something else, but I don't feel like the damage penalty is worth it. So it's just down to me persevering and trying to go to the next floor and hoping that there would be a sacrifice room or a curse room or whatever. And of course, there wasn't, and it was just so discouraging and kind of so unlucky at some point. But because of all of that, I missed boss rush, I made so many mistakes. The Guppy's tail, not Guppy's tail, Guppy's college trolled me in some regards. There were so many rooms which had enemies behind rocks, so I really wasn't able to get a good shot of them. That kind of led me to making even more mistakes in this last floor. So you might have noticed that I had Pandora's Box, and a Pandora's Box gives you a random boss item whenever you're on the womb too. So what I should have done is definitely went in the secret room, popped it there, used the judgment, used the blood bank, tried to play it as much as possible, and then try to reroll it as many times as I possibly could in order to kind of maximize my chances of getting like a Forget Me Now, or maybe a blank card, or maybe even the shovel, because those three items would have definitely helped me in some regard. Of course, I ended up kind of mistaking and just wasting that opportunity because I used the Pandora's Box in a random room, but in the end I didn't save enough charges for me to actually have a charge to reroll the Judgment and the Blood Bank if I did decide to play them. And I could have played them because remember, I had the Polaroid, and because of that I would be able to have the invisibility, so even if there was a Demon Beggar, I would still be able to get a payout out of that. So overall, just a very unfortunate silly mistake which I feel could have been amended. But then again, it was a Star Wars day, I had Brimstone with Technology, I can't be too upset of this run. I do wish that it went on for a little bit longer, because there's nothing quite like just entering a room, shooting a blood laser into enemies and just melting and killing them instantly. But what can you do? Hopefully the next daily will be better. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.